the term good girl and good boy, and hearing that used, kids grab onto that. And so if I fall over but don't cry and then get told good girl, well, then I'm learning that in order to be a good girls don't cry. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Remind podcast. I'm Dr. Ashleigh Moreland and I'm joined by my co-host David Masterton, and today we are talking about the topic of the good kid. This is something I heard a lot. Still to this day as an adult, I hear a lot that my mum will say, "Oh, you were a good kid." And did you get that, Dave? Were you a good kid?
I'm glad you're a good kid because I certainly wasn't. So we'll be able to balance this out quite nicely.
Yeah. So we talk a lot, if you're new to this show, we talk a lot around childhood and early life experiences and programming of our mind and all those kinds of things. And the concept of the good kid is one that I go into a lot of detail about in various programs, especially around parenting, because we have to ask ourselves the question, what do we mean when we say good kid? Is a good kid a kid who doesn't cry? Is a good kid a kid who is seen and not heard? Is a good kid who cleans up their room? Like, what is it that makes a good kid a good kid? So I think this is going to be pretty powerful, Dave.
Absolutely. So what is the definition of a good kid? Well, if I go back to when I was a kid, when was I praised for being a good kid? When I listened, when I was not making too much trouble, when I wasn't doing the bad things, like, look, kids lie, they scream, they shout. All of those things is not necessarily celebrate as a parent. And even for myself, if my kids lie, it's not going to be one of those things like, job well done. But a lot of the things were really about how when you're a good kid, you do everything that's expected of you based on your parents, which is based on what their parents thought was a good kid. So you did well at school, you were compliant, you listened, you were well-mannered, you respected the elders.
Oh, big one.
And then you applied yourself, you were driven, you were good academically, you were good at sport, you were, whatever it was that you were kind of good at. Now, I'm not trying to paint the fact that parents, or especially my parents, had obscenely high expectations. That's not the case. But if we had to look at if you had to have a checklist of all the things that applied across different kids, because some kids could be highly academic, some kids could be highly athletic. But whatever you did, these were kind of the metrics of being a good kid. Yet to see a perfectly good kid, because they need to express and all of those type of things. So I suppose this episode's about trying to look at what is the old definition of a good kid versus actually what is natural. And what should we be expecting for the developmental growth? Because essentially they pop out and we expect them to be 30-year-olds, if by definition of a good kid.
Oh gosh, no. I don't know which 30-year-olds you're hanging out with, Dave, but there's not too many 30-year-olds who are super compliant, like, loving, genuine. Put it this way, there's not many 30-year-olds I know that I want my kids to turn out like.
Wow.
That's a bit scary.
Not that we have a problem with 30-year-olds. I'm just going to say this is the top of the show, right?
Yeah. But it's about understanding why, well, again, it comes back to why we are the way that we are. But for me, I think about the term good girl and good boy, and hearing that used, kids grab onto that. And so if I fall over but don't cry and then get told good girl, well, then I'm learning that in order to be a good girls don't cry.
Reinforced. Reinforced behaviour.
Or if I am feeling really angry but I suppress that anger and say sorry, despite the fact that I feel deep in my soul that I wasn't in the wrong, but I say sorry and override that, then I'm a good girl.
Yeah,
You
okay.
know?
If you're seen and not heard, all of these sort of behaviours which, and I get it as a parent, and you probably get this as well, when the kids are quietly reading or playing or doing those kind of things, it gives us space.
Yeah.
Now, if we're completely regulated, great, because then we get some downtime. We actually get to recoup. We get to do something which is nice. If we're not regulated or feeling like there's a bit going on, it gives us space to start to work through the things that we need to work through so we can hopefully get to a regulated space or just be able to have some downtime. And so generally, we are reaffirming these type of things simply because we're parents. We need to have those times. And as much as we love and enjoy having kids around, parents and parenting, it's a lot of work. And generally parenting is not a job done by itself. Usually you have to work and parent and. So I kind of get the whole, let's reinforce the behaviours that make it easier for us as parents to do that, as opposed to, well, let's just say the kid gets angry. And I've had this only just this week. My youngest one, William, starts to get angry. And when he gets angry, he tells me, Dad, I'm angry. And then when I ask him what it's about, and he's saying it's because of me and the things that I'm doing, it's that sort of, actually, well done, mate, for sharing.
Yeah.
It's because, okay, if you're angry, great. Be angry, because you're never going to be happy all the time. You're never going to love every choice I'm going to make. You're not going to love everything that comes out of my mouth. Be angry. Talk to me. Let's talk through it. Whether it's I change my mind based on something I've missed, or whether you're open to me talking a little bit more about it so that you can understand where I'm coming from, we'll figure it out. But the fact he opened the door, and we're talking about an 8-year-old here, and there's big emotion, there's, eyes watering, real frustration coming out, but being able to talk to me, and I sort of say, mate, I'm so proud of you for talking to me. Good on you. I think being able to express emotion is being a good kid. Whether I like it as a parent or not, the emotion or the feedback that's coming back to me, it's kind of irrelevant, because I'm trying to encourage the sense of self within the kids. Doesn't mean I have to agree with them. What are your thoughts on that?
I love that. I love that. Thanks for sharing that story. I could really resonate because my daughter just turned 7, and ever since, she's been my little mirror. When I say my mirror, she mirrors back to me the parts of myself that I couldn't love. And I think I've spoken about that on the show before. And in her big emotions, if I don't create space for that, if I can't create the space for her to have big emotions and remain connected to me, not an if, not an or, it's either you have small emotions and remain connected to me because I can handle your small emotions, or you can have big emotions, but I need to disconnect from you because that's too much. So there's space here for your emotions and I can remain connected to you. And that's co-regulation. And I think the risk of this good girl versus nothing, because it's not like we say, bad girl. You're a bad girl for drawing outside the lines, or for, making that mistake, or having a messy room, or whatever it might be. But it's what's not said. Children really struggle to fill in the blanks accurately because they don't have a full worldview yet. They don't have a fully developed mind yet. And so their capacity to fill in the blanks is kind of lacking. And so if Elodie gets feedback, oh, wow, you did such great colouring in, good girl. But then she looks at the colouring in and realises that she coloured in the lines. If she colours out of the lines, then I must be a bad girl because I coloured in out of the lines. And that's kind of how this comes about, is it's the things that we don't get the feedback on that we then try and extrapolate the feedback that we've had to reach our own conclusions, but those conclusions are often wrong. And so if I've been a good girl by being quiet, well, then the opposite to that must mean that if I'm loud, I'm bad. And how I think the saddest thing for me is seeing this programming active in adults who come through my programs and those kinds of things, who really have such unrelenting standards of themselves because they were programmed that they needed to be, in order to be good, these are the conditions. The conditions on connection, the conditions on love are that you're good, and good means quiet, calm, regulated, doing well at school, all the things that you sort of mentioned earlier. And I recently had an experience with my son and report cards. And I used to get a lot of feedback when I was a child on my report cards, like, good girl, wow, you did so well, good. There was so much attention and so much feedback given to those things that I wanted to do more of those things to get the attention and to get the feedback. But that resulted in me being an adult who was always striving for more, always striving for perfection. If I didn't get a high distinction at uni, it was like a crushing sensation in my chest, because then that meant I was bad.
Wow, okay.
You know, it's heavy stuff, this good girl programming. But you know what it resulted in is it resulted in me rebelling and gone, well, if I do my best and it's still not enough and I'm still not the good girl because those standards are so unrelenting and unachievable, then beep, I'm gonna rebel. And I had my rebellion years where I was the bad girl.
Gotcha.
Textbook bad girl. Naughty girl.
Well, actually, was it textbook bad girl? Because I'm pretty sure your textbooks were still fine. Right? Academically, you're still going, but it was probably just everything else that was going a little bit haywire.
Yeah. Hardcore. I flew off the handle.
Wow. And that was probably with what? Just your going out, behaviours, relationships, those type of things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But during that time, did you ever change? Were you a bad guy in the sense of, I'm going to actively get a D in this report?
No.
Right. So there's probably something in you which, you know, outside of the positive feedback, it was something where you still wanted to strive to be the best that you could academically, because it sort of resonated.
Deep down I wanted to, but it was like my actions were rebelling against that desire. It would be like, I would know that I've got an assignment due, but I'd go to clubbing instead.
But did you ever get the D? Did you ever get the just
pass?
Look, the 50%?
I remember having an exam. I remember having an exam. It must have been in first year, because that was kind of the peak of this. Well, maybe not the peak, but it was definitely during that time. And I remember having an exam where I was like, you know what? I stopped showing up to class around week 7 or something.
Gotcha.
Because I felt like I'd already knew enough about the other stuff that I could fluke a pass. And I stopped showing up to class. I started going partying. It was a bit of a train wreck time. And I just passed.
Okay. How did
just?
And when you just passed, how did you feel about that?
I didn't feel great.
Okay.
It didn't feel good in my body, because the perfection equals worthy. Perfection equals worthy of love. Perfection equals worthy of attention. But I was in such a self-loathing time that I was in like a, well, F the world kind of thing. I don't want your attention anyway.
Yeah.
Like, it's so interesting.
Because it's quite interesting about the academic. So for me, I had the opposite. And when I say opposite, for me, it was the opposite desire or the will or the whatever it was. My parents will always encourage me and sort of say, David, you put your mind to anything, you can do whatever you want. Highly supportive, but when it came to school and academics and all of that, my interest was always, how the hell is this going to help me get a job? I was either a toddler or a small child or an adolescent or whatever it was, looking at the adulthood. I want to drive, I want to get a job, I want to get on with it.
Did you have any desire around what that job would be, though?
Right at the start, it was probably being a builder, actually, because I always had this thing about taking things apart and putting them back together again. And so it was very sort of fix or make or build. And then, but that kind of finished, or that kind of desire sort of stopped probably midway through high school, where then, I mean, I'm showing a bit of age here, but, you know, computers came out, and I remember being in the library where the first computer with a CD came, and that CD was actually in a cassette that went into the computer, had Encarta 96 or whatever it was on it. And someone will probably correct me in the comments, Encarta, whatever it was. And it blew my mind. And then from there, sort of technology sort of took my sort of radar. But the whole time, I'd never really applied myself. I could never get into it. I could never sort of go, oh, algebra, this is awesome. Or grammar, verbs, adverbs, whatever it is. This is really...
I was the kid asking for extra algebra homework.
You're the one up the front with the hand up, and I'm the one down the back, you know, just doing whatever, drawing or just doodling or just, I even got to a point in high school where the teachers wouldn't even ask me to hand my homework in because they knew I wouldn't. But there was only a couple of things that I sort of really applied myself, things that really interest me. One of them was it was a project on the Titanic. And for some reason, that just really got me interested, and then off I went. So when it came to right at the end of high school, I did design technology, which is, again, building. I built an entertainment cabinet. I did music, and it was also computers. And... yeah, I passed those. Everything else, massive fail. Got the report card right at the end for the HSC, like woeful. And my parents just didn't get it. Yeah, because...
So did they not understand why you wouldn't apply yourself? Did you feel any negative feeling about it? Like, did you feel like a failure? Did you feel anything? Or
I felt
you just
it felt like a waste of time. It felt like a waste of time.
Yeah.
To be honest, when I looked at school, it's like when I look at the jobs I'm going to get, when I look at what my aim is, and it's to get older, get a job and all of that. Yes, in hindsight, I'm happy I can read. I'm happy I can write. I write like a doctor. Not I'm trying to offend any doctors. Yes, I'm looking at you, Ash. But
I don't know. Don't tell me with that brush. My writing's beautiful.
It is.
Someone's a good girl with good writing.
And I was thinking to myself, why do I need a pen? Eventually, it's going to be keyboards. But anyway, I probably didn't have that much forethought. But it was just like, it just felt like, how am I going to apply this? It's a complete waste of time. And so for me, when I'm motivated about something, the energy follows. And I certainly wasn't motivated when it came to school. Even though the parents were 100% supportive, they would, you know, we moved a couple of times. I even went to a boarding school to try and get me to focus. And look, I was just doing the same thing I was doing even in a boarding school. So... when I look back then and sort of go, for my parents, would they say I'm a good kid or a good student? Well, probably not, because what's the measure of being a good kid in an academic sense? You apply yourself, you have a go, and you achieve whatever. Like, you don't have to be 100 out of 100. My parents never expected that. They just wanted me to at least do the best of my ability, which everyone at the table knew I wasn't, because I just simply wasn't interested in it. So, but, you know, not fast forward, but during that time, ADHD, yep, tick, got that. You know, fairly creative, but in the wrong way. So I'd try and find as many ways as to get out of something than to actually do it. Tick. And so that would have been very frustrating. For them. I then look at my kids, and look, they're like, William especially is incredible physically. When it comes to any movement, he's amazing. He's been a little bit, had a bit of a struggle when it comes to paying attention, sitting still and doing those things. Yeah, I get all that. And he's in the window when it comes to grades and where he wants to be. He was completely out of it in the wrong direction, but he's sort of marching up. And Darcy is doing quite well at school, and but not sort of outstanding. But again, it's coming from someone who looks at school and sort of says, well, it is important to go through and do it, but exactly how you're motivated isn't necessarily to sit down and get the grades, which is a really cool dynamic between you and me. Look at the same thing with two different lenses.
Absolutely. It's so fascinating, isn't it? And my kids couldn't be more opposite. Literally could not be more opposite if they tried. And Elodie is very academic. She enjoys it though. She really enjoys it. And so learning from my past and really bringing intention to what I want a good kid to mean. To me, I want her to become an adult who pursues things that fulfill her, who pursues things that she finds joy in, who is willing to go all in and take risks on things, knowing that she might fail, knowing that she might not get it the first time, and for those things to be safe for her. That's really important to me. Elijah doesn't particularly love school because school isn't conducive to his strengths. Now, when I say it's not conducive to his strengths, it's not that he doesn't love school. He really enjoys aspects of school, but there are some things that are just not for him. And he doesn't have any interest in it, and he doesn't have any desire to learn it. And so what I'm working towards with him is acknowledging that a good kid is someone who is willing to sometimes push themselves outside of their comfort zone. And we really praise him for the things that he is great at, but also being willing to have conversations with his teachers. Like something that I really had to call out is teachers who wanted to have conversations with me about my kids in front of my kids. Because remember, kids are joining dots, but they do it terribly. And so if I don't stand in the space for them, let's say, for example, I go to school, the teacher wants to pull me aside and tell me all the ways Elijah didn't listen that day, didn't try in class that day, he didn't do this and he didn't do that and he didn't do this and he didn't do that. If I allow that to happen when he's in earshot and then stick my head in the sand, go home, make dinner and get on with life, by me not standing in that space for him to help him interpret that, then I'm saying I'm going to let my 10-year-old's brain do the job. He's very underdeveloped, not formed brain, and he's going to do a terrible job, and he's going to start to implement these learnings that he's bad. He's a bad student, he's bad at this, he's bad at that, he's bad at this, and he's naughty, and he's not worthy of this, and he's a bad kid. None of that's true. Now, I go to the extent of actually stopping, and I'll use my hand if I have to, like literally put my hand up and say, I'll stop you there. I'm more than happy to have this conversation. I'm not willing to have this conversation in front of Elijah. So if there's anything you need to speak to me about, please do. Give me a call, find a time, we'll chat. But I'm not willing to have this conversation here. It's not appropriate. Or if something is said and he hears it, I stand in the space by actually then chatting with him about what he heard. And then how that made him feel. And then help him to rework that scenario and that situation to make sure that the meaning he assigns to it is more representative of truth, as opposed to the misconception or the lie or the deception that he's bad or naughty or or whatever else, because those identity labels stay with you. If you believe when you're a child that you're bad, you're dumb, you're naughty, then those labels you're going to have a very hard time taking off yourself. So the good kid thing, I will specifically have conversations with his teachers around, did Elijah attempt some work today? And they'll say, yeah, he did a great job. And we'll set some achievable goals that support him, but also being able to recognize what are the barriers to him meeting the worldly standard of a good kid. Well, okay, here's the first barrier. When he's trying to do something outside, like PE, for instance, he'll go from being willing to have a go at kicking the footy to being willing to at least have a go at participating. But then if they do something inside in their multi-purpose room, it's hard surfaces, hard floors, hard ceiling, lots of windows. The sound travels. It's very echoey, massive sensory overload for his nervous system, which puts him into a complete sensory shutdown. And guess what? In those instances, he'll be sitting in a corner reading, trying to self-regulate, not participating, not willing to try. If someone tries to encourage him to participate, he's going to go even deeper into his hole, because it's like me saying, hey, Dave, just put your hand on that hot stove. You'll be right. Just do it. Just put your hand on the hot stove.
You get used to it after a while.
Yeah. You're naughty because you wouldn't put your hand on the hot stove. Now, that was a threat. So for him, it's kind of, I feel really strongly about educating educators and educating the caretakers to understand where those expectations are coming from. And is it a reasonable expectation? Because in that time, he's not being naughty and he's not being bad. He's self-regulating. And if more adults could self-regulate, we wouldn't have such a dysfunctional world.
Well, welcome to the change that we're trying to create. Because it's quite interesting that you sort of mentioned that. And schools are a big thing, and teachers, they cop it, right? I don't know about your school, but the school that William and Darcy go to, there's generally 2 teachers for every, like there's like 30 something kids per classroom. And there might be a teacher's aide, or there might be sort of something there, but predominantly the head count of kids to teachers is actually quite high. And then you sort of look at, so the ability for one adult to be able to monitor all of these kids, it's difficult. So what will generally happen? The ones that are compliant don't necessarily get the attention, because what will then happen is the ones that are disrupting, they kind of stand out. It's like if you have like a decking, right? The nail that you're going to notice is the one that's sticking up slightly. Doesn't need to be much, but you'll catch on it and it'll annoy you, so you have to do something about it. And so it's very difficult to be able to do that. So then at the end of school, and then suddenly the teacher wants to have a talk, then I think it's really important that conversation's had, because again, you've got an adult looking after all of these kids. Because really, as parents, when we send kids to school, we do it for them to learn, but we also need that time to actually go and do our work, to pay the bills, to do all of that, right?
That is a cold, hard truth. There's an element of babysitting to it, right?
Absolutely. And so when we sort of look at that, we sort of say, well, they need to be experts in kids, and look, for the most part, they do a great job. But it's really interesting when you sort of say stopping having the conversation, because when you started with that, you said you do one of 2 things. You'll stop the conversation if there's something going on, or you'll talk it through. I'm a big advocate of the second thing that you sort of said. Let's have the conversation, and if William or Darcy is part of that conversation, they're not just a spectator in that conversation.
Yes, but they're an active participant who's consenting to the conversation. You
Correct.
do not speak about someone in front of them and allow that to happen.
Correct. So anytime that happens, it's brought in, and then I sort of, if they sort of say William sort of struggled a little bit today, he's, maybe talking too much on the mat or doing whatever it is, then I'll look at William and sort of say, hey mate, how do you feel about that? How did you find being on the mat today? And then he'll talk about, actually, I was really angry. Oh, okay. This is actually coming from an example I just dealt with a couple of days ago. And, okay, so you're talking to who are you talking to? My friends. Okay, why were you angry? Because so-and-so called me dumb. And I was really angry, and I needed to, he couldn't say it as eloquently, but he needed to talk about it to get it out. And so, and with that extra information, the teacher and William and myself, it was sort of like beautiful. You know, the teacher's like, great. And then from that quick conversation, there was the ability to sort of go, okay, well, look, if that happens, please try and talk to the teacher. Because, you know, it's just one of those things. Like, because, yeah, what if I was a teacher, what would I need? Everyone paying attention so I can get through today's work. Because, I mean, like a bit like yourself being a lecturer before, right? It's sort of like if you had all these guys or people talking at you while you're trying to do a lecture, it's like, if you don't want to be here, get out. I've got this is what we need to get through. So, and so that's why we reinforce as parents or as teachers or whatever, is if we need to get this done, which we've all agreed, you've dropped your kids off at school, you want us to look after your kids and you want them to learn, okay, this is the information I need to get through in today. Well, the kids that are disrupting it, they're going to be said, well, you're making it hard for me, you're being bad, or
you're not being good.
You're not being, there you go, you're not being good, right? And for everyone who is there okay being quiet, you are being good because you're allowing me to get through the work. And so, but yeah, and I think school's changing, and I hope it changes even further, where it comes back to what do we need to learn? With the advent of AI and all these other things coming in, which from a me point of view, you learn how to be social, you learn how to interact with others. Yes, you learn some stuff, but this whole focus around memory-based training, where
and grading,
our kids are going to live in a world where AI is going to be frighteningly better. You won't need to remember a goddamn thing. It'll just be there, and you just lean on it. What skills are they going to need? So for me, what's being a good kid is being able to, when you do leave school and you do become an adult, that you are encouraged to be a confident adult, whatever that is. Have the self-confidence to be able to enter the world without having to worry so much about what it is to participate in this world.
Yeah,
and yes,
I agree. And the only thing that I would call out is the disruption. So there's not just two options in a classroom, a kid just participating and being the good kid versus the kid disrupting. The other option is that a kid who may not be participating but is also not disrupting other people from participating. And that's a really, really important standard to uphold. And I think where that is the thing that's missing, supporting a child, like exactly the example in the PE example that I gave, the options were you participate or you don't, but the viewpoint was he's actually not disrupting anyone else from participating, but his lack of participation isn't because he's being naughty or bad. His lack of participation in that moment is because he's self-regulating. Now, does that mean to say that he doesn't, give him an inch and he attempt to take a mile? Maybe, absolutely. Probably anyone potentially could do that. But I think that's a really important conversation piece, is including the aspect that, the teacher has to get through their day. And to me, so having self-awareness and awareness of self and others. So self-responsibility comes into that. But to have self-responsibility, we have to have awareness of self. We have to have an understanding of how our choices impact those around us. And That is a really, really powerful training ground. So for me, a good kid is a kid who can have, well, not kids who are learning. I actually don't use the term good kid, good boy, good girl. I don't say that in my family in general.
Same.
But in my mind, if I were to think about it, I would want my child to have an awareness, a growing, evolving awareness of how their actions have a ripple effect. And know when, through their own self-awareness and their own value systems, that it is worth having a ripple effect if it means standing in your truth, standing up for yourself. Because the risk of that is that they become people pleasers. Awareness of self and awareness of others might be, oh, I don't want to do that because they might get upset.
Oh, there is consequences to standing up to someone.
Absolutely. There's a ripple effect no matter what we do. But if it's finding the balance between, well, I can stand up for what I believe in and equally not be life-taking from someone else, not be shutting down or negatively impacting or influencing someone else. So it's an interesting one because these things are not black and white. And the thing with labels and dualism is it's good or bad.
Well, if it's not good, what is it?
It's right or wrong. Exactly.
Yeah.
So the only two options is good or bad. But what about, that's so fixed mindset. It has to be this or this. When we talk about an open mind, so having an open mind, bringing curiosity to the table, what that curiosity affords us is conversations around context. And in the context, what did this mean? And, you know, with report cards, I think the grading system, I never look at grades. It doesn't mean anything to me in terms of their academic performance. But I sure as heck want to hear the stuff about, were they kind? Were they thoughtful? Did they stand up for what they believed in? Did they ask for help when they needed it? Those kinds of things. Because those children who display and who, adults who nurture those skill sets in children are breeding adults who are more highly conscious, who are self-aware, who has awareness of self and others, and can contribute, leave positive ripple effects in the world. And that's what's important to me.
Yeah, and I think you raise an important point about context. Who sets the context, right? So who sets the curriculum for school? And when was the last time it was properly reviewed as to the benefit of it? And how has then technology been overlaid as to the necessities of the subject matter and all of that, then the gradings appropriately and so forth. It's actually a very slow-moving machine. The people within the system are trying, but it's a very big system. Like wherever you look at it, it's a very big system. It's been around for a very long time. And so it is sort of something that will eventually catch up. But at the moment, as things progress outside of the school system, it's going to take a while. So when you look at context, well, the context is based on the system. And
the system, I think almost everyone, including teachers, will agree is broken. That's why the education, there's so many strikes and that kind of thing in Australia.
Well, it just can't keep up with the progression. So I agree. Yeah. I fully agree. And so I've got to say, being a good kid, it's just based on the context. So if we sort of wrap this all up, being a good kid is based on the scorecard that you place as a good kid. The scorecard's written based on the context, and the context is brought to you by the system. Now, right now, we are in this amazing time where things are shifting pretty quickly. What was good is now being challenged as good for what? What was that good for? Okay, oh shit, if we go backwards a little bit, actually the whole social or the schooling system was really there to help produce factory workers based when we needed it through the
Yeah.
Industrial Revolution. So
Yeah.
it was good for that. But is it good for now? Oh, okay, maybe not.
Yes.
So all of that's happening, all of that's changing, the system, the context, the scorecards and all of that. And it's great that everyone that's on board is on board. So for anyone out there
Yeah.
thinking
You
they're a bad
reminded me
kid, oh,
of this. I was
yeah,
just looking at this morning. So this is a book called Conscious Revolution: The Awakening of Souls. I contributed to this last year. And as you were talking then, it reminded me of something that I literally just read this morning. And in my chapter, I unpacked what revolution meant. And it says the word revolution literally means a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system. And when we're in, you just mentioned the Industrial Revolution, the reason I have so much hope for humanity is because I believe we are in a conscious revolution where there is
100%.
going to be a forcible overthrow of government and social order in favor of elevated consciousness, in
And
favor of really deeply spiritually connected people. And that's what excites me so much about, even the term revival, revive us, renew us. I think that is so necessary. And when you say, it was interesting, I observed in myself when you said they need to overhaul the system or the system will catch up, my immediate response in my body was, no, it won't, which was so interesting to observe. And that's why I then thought about that line in the book, is that I really do believe that it will, but I don't think it's going to look like what we think it might.
well, it's sort
And
of, there's a way it could be when you sort of go, ugh. It's sort of like, do we need to fight them? Like, I guarantee you look at teachers, you look at everyone in the system, or that provide schooling. Those people are awakening as we speak as well, and so it will catch up because there'll be more people who are interested in the conscious than they are in the past, and there might be some relics that are left that really enjoy the old whatever it is, the power or of keeping people maybe a little bit more asleep when we're just focused on algebra, trigonometry, verbs, adverbs, whatever it is. I don't know why I'm picking on maths and English, but that they won't be able to overcome the wave of the consciousness. So it will catch up whether people like it or not, whether we go, parading down on horseback with our swords in the air. I doubt we need to get to that point anymore. It's not going to be an overthrow like that. It'll just be as more and more people, similar to us, because we are just, one of many people who are talking about the consciousness. It's all within and all of those type of things. It will absolutely change. So a bit like yourself, I'm excited to see what that looks like.
yeah. Oh. So guys, Dave mentioned scorecard. We are a good kid according to the measure of the scorecard that we are measured against. So if you are listening to this, I would encourage you to look at what scorecard you use. What are the conditions on your scorecard? If you are a parent, what is the scorecard that you are measuring or assessing your children against to determine whether or not they are good? Because anything that is a condition on that scorecard represents conditional love, and anything that is a condition on their love, their underdeveloped, underformed brain and mind is going to be filling in the blanks on your behalf, and it will be filling them with lies that is just not true. So it is absolutely worth rewriting your new scorecard and scoring them against that instead. It'll transform your lives and your family and have ripple effects for generations.
That's awesome. I know we need to wrap this up, but just when you said that, the one thing that popped up, it's not for me, but I've seen it in play with other parents, it's don't embarrass me. So imagine,
Wow.
like, just think to yourself, is that on your scorecard? Because then, anyway, we can maybe probably do another episode later on about all of that. But just think about it. So that was awesome. Episode 24 this week. Episode 25 next week. That's pretty big. Looking forward to that. And I reckon I'll catch you next week, Ash. Bye-bye,
Yes, you
everyone.
will. Bye.